Good morning. On behalf of the Phelps Dunbar Law Firm and my partners in the Jackson office, I wanted to thank you all for welcoming us to help you and to share information with you about the H2A program. Yes, ma'am. What I'd like to do is talk about the recent changes to the H2A program and give you information that's going to help you with your labor compliance objectives at each of your farms. I've spent the past 20 plus years of my career working as a labor lawyer, primarily serving the agricultural community. And I've spent the last 4 years in litigation with the federal government to improve the H2A program, primarily because of wages and compliance. Last year, we made significant progress in federal court in a lawsuit that was brought by sugar farmers to change the way the program is regulated. The impact of that lawsuit delivered a nationwide injunction or vacator that was applicable to farmers throughout the United States. And the big outcome is we were successful in changing the way that wage policy and H2A compliance policy operates in the United States of America. And we're hoping that in this upcoming planting season, as well as the harvesting season in 2026, we will all feel the immediate impact of that progress. And so I want to begin by looking at some of the major issues that face you. And we've got about a top 10 points that I want to discuss with you over the next hour or so. The big thing is you do need to know that there was a change to the way H2A applications can be filed in October. That change primarily impacts the wages that you pay, the type of employees that you can hire through the program, and how you interact with the federal government to obtain certification for the labor that you need. And so we're going to spend at least about 30 or so minutes on that because it's that important. I think I have a positive message for farms in the United States, and the positive message about the changes is, in my opinion, it's good that in the state of Louisiana and Mississippi, we have wage relief. And so for the most part, wages here and in my state and also in Texas are going to be a little shy of about $10 per hour for farm workers and crop workers, row crop producers, nursery workers, and general agricultural workers. Wages will slightly increase for agricultural employees that work in more skilled positions. And what you need to know is, how is the Department of Labor going to decide whether you get the benefit of the fair wage or whether you're going to be classified in paying higher wages for different skills? And so that's really what the change is all about in terms of how you can work with your agents, whether it's us or whether it's any of my other colleagues who work throughout the state of Mississippi to support you all, to make sure that when you present your applications, they're presented in the way that the government views them now so that you can get what you need and so you can have it on time. And so that's going to be the focus of our discussion for the next hour. I want to look at the worker protection rule. You got to know about four big things. Number one, categorically, the government has outlawed fees and contract rates to recruit workers. And what does that mean? If in the sugar industry in Louisiana, most of our labor comes from Mexico and Costa Rica and sometimes Guatemala. I'll be back in Mexico on the 16th of this month to take care of some cases down there. What I know when I'm there is there are a lot of recruiters who speak with Mexicans or Central Americans who want to come to the United States, and they will charge those people money to get on a contract. What you need to know is that's an absolute no-no now. And if you engage in that, that's a part of your business model, it has to change. Farms can pay recruiters directly, but farms can never allow a recruiter to pay a kickback to come over. And it's a prevalent practice there, not really normal here so much, but you have to be aware of it because now it's absolutely prohibited. Whistleblower protections. The pendulum has swung, I believe. We're in a new phase of worker protection, discrimination rights, union organization, and workplace activities to assert rights, to complain about working conditions. I know that you all have talked about heat issues over the summer. Here's what you need to know. Now, H2A workers have whistleblower protection. And so if they come to you and they report an issue at work concerning their work conditions, your ability to comply with the law, whether they believe that you violated the law, whether they believe that their wages are correct, all of that will expose you to a much greater risk that that worker has protected status after giving that complaint. And what that means for you is you can't retaliate against that worker in any way. And that was always the law. What's different now is these workers now have statutory protection for blowing the whistle. And so that means if they bring a lawsuit, they can't be fired, and most likely they've got to come back on the contract in the next season. If they report to you, they can't be disciplined. And also, almost any form of conduct after you receive a complaint, any type of change in the terms and the conditions of their employment could be considered to be a whistleblower violation on your part. So we need to be nimble about that. I think when workers first come, definitely in Louisiana, what we're trying to do now is day one, when you get here, we have a safety meeting, or a compliance meeting. And in that meeting, we outline this is everything that we expect during the season. These are going to be the duties. You've already received your job order. If you have any questions or if you have any problems with the way work works on our place, come to us immediately and we're going to help you as best we can. Those types of conversations are going to be helpful for you because you can have a clear record of these are the communications that we give to our employees. We let them know on the front end if they have a problem, they should report it. And we also let them know that we're here to help. And all of that will kind of keep us out of the courtroom. I will tell you in the Delta, I take care of catfish farmers in the Delta. Also in Louisiana, I have seen a massive increase in the number of EEOC charges and labor charges that are brought by worker groups. So you do need to be aware of it. The good news, I think, is that the Department of Labor is probably going to be a little less muscular in wanting to come out to farms to inspect, to do workforce enforcement and things like that. The bad news is immigration is probably going to be knocking at your door. And that's a whole different thing. When the Department of Labor comes, it's never pleasant, but at least they don't have guns. When immigration comes, it's still not pleasant, and they do have guns. I think that the risk with immigration receiving more power, and when I say immigration, I mean the Department of Homeland Security. I drove up this morning from New Orleans, and I don't know if you all have paid attention to our news down there. We now have Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and all of those agencies in the city, and they're moving through like it's Mardi Gras at a parade. It's really big. It's massive. I really was shocked to see it. The difference now that applies to all of us in the agricultural community is ICE is going to do far more enforcement on farms than they ever have done. And so there's a double risk. The first risk is people who you employ that you may not know to be undocumented are not going to come back because they're afraid. Second risk is if ICE comes to your farm, they could also make a mistake in picking up your lawful workers. And so you just need to be aware of it. What would I do? now that there's a change in the tone and the government is serious and you see it playing out, so it's actually happening. What do? Number one, you do need to have a handle on your paperwork in terms of where is my approval notice for the crew that I brought in this season? And then do I have copies of everybody's passport to show the visa that they got at the consulate in Mexico? And if you don't have that basic paperwork in order, I do think it makes sense, good common sense, to try to ask those workers, hey, let me make a scan of your passport so we can have it on file, so we can have records if the government comes, hey guys, here's my people, here's every name that works on my place, and here's the proof that they're actually in lawful status. Secondly, when you're talking to your crews, it's going to be important now more than ever to make sure that everybody has their passport on their person at all times, and especially when they leave the farm. So if somebody's going into town, they could be going to Walmart or what have you, they really do need to carry that passport. It's because the passport is going to have the visa stamp inside of it, and it's just going to make things move a lot smoother if ICE stops them, that they can say, well, this person is legal. We had a habit down here in Louisiana and in Mississippi when crews arrive. Most of them, a lot of them would ask, oh, can you keep my passport in the bunkhouse? And just, it would be kind of in the housing, in a central location. Those days are over. All of you guys need to have it, need to carry it at all times. The last big thing, and we'll talk about it in detail, is I think that the program has improved significantly in terms of how efficient it is. Some of the costs that have been reduced outside of the wage costs and the timing. And so I just want to give you the highlights of that. It used to be that if a farm came to us and they said, listen, we need you to get labor in, our nursery is suffering, or we've got a catfish processing place up in the Delta, and we can't get anybody in. We need to have bodies on the ground on February 1st. Okay. We would have to then go to the Department of Labor to get a certification and make sure that we could work with immigration to turn that farmer's application around on time so that they could actually get the people that they needed on February 1st. The government has now slashed through some of the steps in the middle. And so while I'm waiting on the Department of Labor to give you a certification, I can immediately file with immigration so they can process that visa application. That's huge because it's going to make lawyers and agents who take care of you much more capable of giving you what you need on time. Here's another thing I know that the Mississippi State is going to have their row crop conference, I think next week, for row crop farmers. The norm in that space of our industry is when you work for this group of farmers and you're helping them with their row crops, after you finish planting for one farmer, you'll go ahead and travel on to the next farmer and work farm to farm to farm, and then come back where you started to work in the crops. Now, workers in H2A status that need to have and need to be able to go from farm to farm to farm to farm in a season, they can do that simply by filing a petition. It used to be that you had to wait until that petition was approved. Now, the day you file it, the work can move on. So that's a big savings as well. We'll talk about that in better detail as we go through the program. Here's something else. You may not be aware of it. It's normal in this patch of grass in the country that Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas primarily are going to Mexico and Costa Rica and sometimes Guatemala to bring their labor in, which is fine. That's the area of the world that takes care of this area of the country. Also good to know that we can go to all countries now. There used to be an approved countries list. Now the government has opened up the entire globe. And so if you need to go, a lot of labor that you all have a lot of South African labor that used to come to Mississippi. It's kind of changed a little bit. But if you need skilled trades in ag, a lot of that did come from South Africa. Um, more, more countries are now open so that you can find that type of skill anywhere around the globe. That's a big issue. Then the last thing that's new, and I think that's helpful to you, is there's more grace. And we all need grace. And not only the grace that comes from the Lord above, the grace that I'm talking about is when a worker finishes working for you. It used to be that that worker would have to get out of the country within about 2 weeks or so. That has changed. That has changed. The maximum amount of time that a worker can stay after they finish their work is now 2 months. If they finish their contract and they're going on to work for somebody else, it's up to 60 days. If you fire a worker, so for cause or somebody's really not cutting it, what have you, they can still stay 30 days. Why is that good? Well, may not work out at one farm, but your neighbor down the street may be able to put that person to good use. And so it gives farms, it gives the business a lot more flexibility in having a labor pool in the country for a longer period of time that you can put to work. I want to just at this moment in time make a comment about what the federal government wrote in their rule that came out in October. And what was the rule? The rule in October was changes to wages, changes to compliance, and changes to your ability to actually get an approval. Here's what the federal government said about why they made the change after we had the lawsuit and after we prevailed on your behalf. The government explained that there are so many foreign nationals who are illegal that the federal government is now shipping out. You couple that with the fact that commodity prices, food prices, your costs, and the bottom line dollar that it takes us to operate in business in a farm economy is rising. Secondly, the border, it is true, for the most part has been sealed up. So you don't have as much traffic that's coming across the border to ease the labor pressure that we experience as a norm in the business. All of these reasons are reasons that the government explained. This is why we're changing the wage policy. They tend to believe that it's going to have the effect of having a steady flow of labor that you can have access to without the regulatory hurdles. As a lawyer, and particularly as a lawyer that litigated the case that was successful, I take the good, I take the bad. For now, I'll just focus on the good. It is good to have a steady flow of labor. It is good to have wages that we can support. And it is good to have some type of apparatus to try to manage the costs of doing business. Whether the cure that the government gave in this instance that was just effective on the 1st of this month. So this is the comment period closed out on December 1st. This is the lay of the land. So in 2026, this is the new scheme that we're going to be in. Whether it actually works, I remain hopeful and faithful, but we have to see whether it actually complies with the results that we delivered in our case. I'm doubtful, and we'll have to see how we address that moving forward. Taking a look at what happened in big cases this year and last year that impact you all, I want to look at about two or three things. Number one, there was a case called Coinbase versus the SEC. And so SEC, what does that have to do with farms? Not much exactly, but it has a lot to do with the government's power to enforce penalties against you. Coinbase was a case that dealt with that. And there's another case called Sun Valley Orchards. Okay, Sun Valley Orchards. So that's a case that's kind of more in our space. What's the bottom line with these cases? The federal courts have said that when the Department of Labor comes or particular federal agencies come and they find violations and they want to charge you money for those violations, the courts may not let the Department of Labor just enforce their own penalties. This is good. Why is it good? Because it's good to have an avenue of review. rather than having to pay the penalty bill without any way of challenging it, without any way of explaining the context of any type of violation. So those are good developments. I want to look and now move on to the big fish in the pond. In 2022 or 2023, I think it was late 2022, the Department of Labor changed the wage rate rules that apply to the H2A program. And the impact of that change right after COVID was that many wages for jobs that were not strictly agricultural. And when I say strictly agricultural, I mean the big six occupations. So true blue farm workers, nursery workers, your row crop workers, your processors that work on the farm, those types of occupations. The wages changed and they went through the roof for many other related agricultural occupations. So what's a related trade? Well, in the sugar industry, you can't make sugar unless you have somebody to haul it. And so cotton gins, you really can't make cotton unless you have somebody to haul it and then gin it. And those types of trades that weren't exactly hands to ground farming had wages that moved from about $13 or so per hour all the way up to about $27 per hour. And when you think about the scale of farming in our country, if farms have to support wages that are almost at $30 per hour to get its crop out of the ground and where it's got to be, well, the business has too much stress and you don't have enough profit left for your input costs for the next season. And so we were asked to look at the government's changes in 2022 and to really make some hard decisions about whether any relief could be brought to farmers in federal court. And the heart of the case was not about making a payday any worse for anybody that works 50 to 60 hours per week. That really wasn't the outcome, or wasn't the intent. The intent instead was to make sure that the federal government treated farms fairly in how they priced wages for the jobs that we need. And so we brought a suit against the Department of Labor at my law firm. We filed that suit in Louisiana because the sugar farmers and also the Florida growers really had the most exposure for the wage increases. That was also true in nurseries. It's also true across farms. A little different in nurseries and farms because you may have a supervisor or a lead guy who is in charge of being the superintendent of your place or is in charge of inspections or quality. And so in North Carolina, there's a lot of melon farmers, Christmas tree farmers. You have employees who work in those industries that are responsible for looking at that tree and is it time now to cut it? Is it sap right? Or looking at the pumpkins or the melons. Are all of my melons ripe enough to pick? Or when should we do it so we don't lose the crop and so it's at its best value? That's a little different than just planting and tending to the crops. But even those lead roles, or if you had people who did construction work on your farm, any type of trades on your farm, those wages went from about $12 to $13 per hour, all the way up to about $17 to $20 per hour. And the minute you took a farm worker who came in as an H2A to help, and you put a hammer in his hand to mend the fence, the government said, well, that's a construction trade, and you got to pay the construction rate all the way through, not just when that particular work is going on. And so the point of the case was to protect farms from these very, very high wages that nobody could support on a sustainable basis. We were blessed. We had a very good judge, and all judges, I believe, who are appointed are good judges. But we had a very, very nimble judge who really took a lot of time to examine how the federal government regulates and makes laws that impact the farming industry. At the end of the day, shortly after the 4th of July this year, we got a very good result and the government threw the rule out. When the government threw the rule out, what became the law was the 2010 rule. And under the 2010 rule, the way everything used to work is every December or so, the government would publish a list of rates, and that's the rate you pay for all agricultural work. So that was good. Around the middle of October, so about a month and a half ago, the Department of Labor went back to the drawing board and they issued a new rule about wages. And that's the rule that applies now. And so we need to take a look at what's in the new rule. As it relates to wages, the Department of Labor has said farms have two options. You can bring in the people that you need to work for your farm, to work in jobs that are low skilled or no skill jobs, or you can tell the government that we need skilled labor with a good amount of experience to do particular work. If you bring in labor that doesn't need any experience, that can show up at your place, that can train with you for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then start picking up the work after that, the government believes that that is a skill level 1 occupation, low skill. And with that, the government will allow farms to pay rates in Mississippi of around $10 per hour. And so the new wage scales for Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas have all been published. It's on the DOL website. When we start taking labor in Mississippi for catfish and up in the Delta and all those other industries in February, those wages should be about $10 per hour. Here's something else. The government said, well, farms have to pay for housing for their labor. And that's a out-of-pocket cost that farms have to pay, whether they're building houses or renting houses or whatever it is. The government will allow you to take an offset for the value of the housing that you're providing to your labor every week. And what does that mean? The dollar amount is written on the wage scales that are on the DOL website. And in the state of Mississippi, it rounds out to be about $1.25 per hour that you can use to offset the $10 per hour wage. That's big, because what they've done is, so long as you're employing people, and I think about it this way, people that would work on the sheriff's crew, like the prison labor, what have you. The idea, if they could walk out of jail and then walk onto a farm, no training, and do the work that you need them to do, then that's going to be considered a skill level 1 low skill wage. And you can have this $10 per hour minus what you pay in housing to get you down to about $9 per hour or so for that class of labor. I think that's a big improvement because, as you all know, the wages had been $13 or $14 per hour as a norm. So it's a massive savings. In skill level 2, what are we talking about there? We're talking about farm workers that certainly have to work your place, but they've got to do it with a little more sophisticated skill than anybody who's just walking off the street to take the job. And what does that mean? Well, if you have to cultivate the crop, fertilize, know when harvest is, get the crop in, that could be low skill for somebody who only needs 1 month of experience as a maximum. If you need somebody that has about 3 months or requires about 3 months of experience to do whatever the work is that you have on the farm, the government now will say, well, your experience requirement is 3 months or more. And so we're most likely going to believe that that job is a higher paying job because your qualifications are more onerous. When you're submitting your labor applications for 2026, and we've already been busy. We've got most of our people for February. We were in Chicago filing those labor applications about a week or two before Thanksgiving. So we're already in for February 1st. And I know that you all are also getting those applications in. You got to read your job description, because what the government has explained in the new rule is we're going to read your job descriptions. We're going to read what you say about the qualifications that you need. And if the qualifications fall along the lines of a more sophisticated worker that requires experience, that is doing work that's a little bit more complex than just a general farm worker, we're probably going to believe that that's a higher wage. Now, on the DOL website, I told you about the fact that all of the wages are published. The low wage is around $10 per hour. The high wage is almost up to $15 per hour. It's about $14.86 or $14.89 in the state of Mississippi. And so the judgment call that I've had to make in serving clients, that you all have to make in running your farms, is the law changed. It's effective for 2026. Before I just send my job application in, I need to read what I said about the job to make sure that I'm stating the qualifications right under these new standards. I'm a lawyer. I work for you. I shouldn't lie to anybody, especially not the federal government. And I'm making that statement so that you understand I would never advocate, nor could I serve you well, if I would go to an application and change the description just to get the wage. I would do you a disservice if I did that. But what I need to do, if I'm really going to serve you, is I need to go through every single farm that has trusted their business to my law firm's care. And before we send in the application for 2026, I've got to look at how the government has changed, how they're going to read it. And I've got to make a judgment call on, well, when I put the description in under the old law, it's because I needed to comply with the old law. And the representation was that if I'm saying this, this is what I shall do. Under the new law, I've got to look and see, does this description make sense under the new law? Is it a true representation of what we're really going to do? And year after year after year, your business changes, my practice changes, the way the economy works changes. We do get into a normal habit in H2A that once we have a good set of facts, once we know when our date is, and once we have a job description that the government will accept, it rarely changes because you want to keep the flow and your cycle the same. this year, going into the 2026 season, we're going to have to take a very hard look at, is what we've written down about our description still accurate? If it's accurate, then the next question is what we've written down still what we actually need? And if we don't need to have a description that has a lot of heavy qualifications, or that says that we need 3 months of experience, which is kind of going to be a red flag for the government almost across the board, then we have to decide, well, can we change that now? And if we can change it, if we make the change and they give us a certification for a job description that fits wages that may be more attractive, can we actually represent to the government that we're only going to do this and we're only going to require this type of work from the employee while maintaining our truthfulness? That's the test. And so crawfish farmers in Louisiana tend to like to have labor that comes with 3 months of experience. And that had been just the norm. If you're going to work in a crawfish pond, if you've got a push boat, if you're going to be able to drain the pond and plant the rice and all of everything that goes along with crawfish farming. And they started really this week. So their crawfish is December 1st. They always like to have 3 months of experience. The government never believed that 3 months of experience was absolutely necessary. And many of their laborers could come with no experience, land on a crawfish farm, work for about a week or two with lead guys, pick up the trade or pick up the farm practice, and then they go. So that means, well, you really don't absolutely need to write down 3 months of experience on your job application, because it's possible, not across the board, but it's possible for many crawfish farmers, for example, to take labor with no experience and then get them on, and they can do what you need them to do, and they can be successful. Likewise, in crawfish farming, really good crawfish farmers have become very scrutinizing of whether they use engine boats or push boats in a crawfish pond. We don't want the diesel leaking into the crawfish pond. It's going to change the taste and the quality of the meat. And so there's this big movement among crawfish farmers to only have push boats in the pond. Well, if we're going to make a change to the equipment that we use, then it's logical that we may not need to write down that our crawfish farmers need to have certain qualifications or need to do certain tasks. So if you're going to be a crawfish farmer and you're going to ride in a boat in the pond to fish crawfish, and that boat is now a push boat, it's not an engine boat, you may not need to have the same level of skills anymore. You need different skills, but not skills that could have triggered a higher wage. This is the type of thinking and sincere thinking that really needs to happen, because we do need to take the benefit of the law, but I'm sober enough of mind to understand that if we make a change, we have to do that in a way that is not deceitful to the federal government. So that's what the stress and the tension is right now in trying to deliver labor to you for 2026. What changes can I make? How can I represent you well? And how can I meet my duty and my obligation of giving sincere, factual representations to the federal government under penalty of perjury? Now that's really what it is. So how do you make the judgment call? You got to do a lot of thinking about what you actually do for the majority of the day. So in the new law, it's hundreds of pages long. The important stuff is probably only about 15 to 20 pages. So it is a good read. if you look it up and we have the links where you're wanting to go under the October 2025 AWER rule change, and you see I've used those letters AWER throughout the presentation, you want to go straight to section C. Straight to section C. That's going to give you the details on how the government is going to read the application and make their judgment call on where you fall in terms of low wage or high wage. What are the types of things that the government is going to look at now? What does the worker do for the majority of the day? And so, classic example, and they cited our case in detail. They analyzed it in detail. That case was about sugar farmers who needed to cut cane and get it to the mill. And they used truck drivers to truck that cane to the mill. And the government believed that those sugar truck drivers should be paid like 18-wheeler drivers that operate through the entire United States. And our position was, well, wait a minute, this is short haul, and it's only for about 2 to 3 months out of the year. So it's different. What the government has said now in the new rule is we're going to start with what do they do for the majority of their work. Sure, they can have various ag and arguably non-ag occupations that are mixed in, but we're going to look at what the majority of the duties are for the substantial portion of the day. And that's their starting mark to decide where you fall on the scale. And so again, if you've got a combination of duties in your job description, we need to take a look at, well, what portion of their day is spent cutting cane, sharpening cane blades, working on the combine, as opposed to working directly in the field to apply fertilizer, working directly in the field to peel back burnt stalks, working directly in the field to look at insecticides and pesticides and things like that, working to get the ground ready for stubble, removing stubble, finding stubble. All of those hand to ground duties are going to have to predominate for the majority of the day. And if they don't, then the government most likely is going to say, this is a wage that needs to go on the high scale. That's the type of the analysis that the government is doing now. So I want to pause there because we have about 10 minutes before the hour, and there's a few other points that I want to hit. But in terms of the wage issues and how this all works, that's the gist of it. And I'll just take 2 seconds to see if anybody has questions about how those applications need to go in or anything that was unclear about what I explained to you about the new rules. Okay, we'll keep moving and then we'll take questions. Yes, sir. Mhm.
That's still that comes off the part that comes in all that money in the trust.
So the answer is, and the Department of Labor addressed this particular issue in detail in the new rule. I've read it many, many, many times, particularly because I don't exactly agree with what they said. It's clear as mud. It's clear as mud. The bottom line is the Department of Labor will believe that that trucking occupation is probably going to trigger a higher wage. I don't agree with that. Our judge that threw out the old law, and I'm being precise because I want to make sure that I explain the court's opinion as well as the resolution of the case accurately. The outcome of the case was that the methodology that the Department of Labor used to set those types of wages was unreliable, which is why we were able, with God's help, to have a successful outcome in the case. After we had the successful outcome, within about, 2 to 3 months, the Department of Labor has tried again. In their repeat, they say, we looked at the court's analysis in the Tesh Vermillion lawsuit down in Louisiana, and we think we have it right now. And in a situation where you have truck drivers, we're going to look to what kind of truck are they driving? What's the gross tonnage of that truck? So what's the weight? What's the weight? They still have that 26,001 pound criteria. We're going to look at, well, how much time is spent hauling on the truck. We're going to look at whether the workers are employed directly by the farm or whether they are employed by farm labor contractors or associations. So not exactly in their view, directly engaged to the farm. And all of those factors are going to go into the government's ability to set the wage higher for trucking. I disagree both with this new methodology as it relates to trucking, and I disagree that the Department of Labor has complied with or has satisfied the issues that the court found when he decided to issue a restraining order on our behalf and a preliminary injunction on our behalf to throw out the rule. I do not believe that the federal government has gotten it right in a way that complies with the court's analysis. I'm not just saying that because we're currently being recorded and that the litigation may come back again. I'm saying that because, among many other reasons, if you read the government's first few pages of why they changed the rule in October after we won, they explained the border's closed. We're sending all of the quote unquote illegals out of the country. And commodity prices and food prices are going sky high. And costs for agricultural employers are out of control. We've got to do something. And we're basing that primarily on a survey of 3,000 workers in 2021 that were not representative of workers in the ag space across the country, and on a survey that the federal government made with its own parameters that was never tested by farms. And so they're standing on that, and they're using that reasoning now to throw out the farm labor survey that had been reliable for many, many years, and to impose a new wage survey scheme that many of us have not participated in yet. And the question that I have is that if the courts believed that this type of approach was not good enough around the 4th of July, how is it possible that it's any better at Christmas? So what we have now is the government is probably going to tell sugarcane farmers who truck that they have to pay the high wage.
It's like,
Yes, sir. I'm talking about the $27. And you get an offset in Louisiana. I think it's $1.30. In Mississippi, it's about $1.25 for the housing. But what I expect to happen if nothing changes and if nobody goes back to court between now and harvest is about Labor Day, so August to September. When we go to harvest in 2026, if we don't go back and get some cure for this, we're going to have the exposure to about $27 per hour, maybe even $30 per hour, based on what they're saying now. They believe that they've addressed what the court said was bad. I see it differently. And what we're going to have to do as an industry now is we're going to have to figure out, well, after we get through planting, and the pressure is kind of on because we're focused now on February and March to get labor in. Harvest will be among us before we know it for 2026. And what we're going to have to figure out is, do we firmly believe that they got it wrong again? And if we do, and if we have the wherewithal and the right farmers who have the right kind of injury from this approach, we're going to have to make a determination whether we go back to court and challenge the rule again. I think that's the general issue for trucking. It's going to be the general outcome for the construction trades. I must admit that the government went through a detailed analysis of how they're going to assign that wage. I have to concede that. But I don't yield from my opinion that their methodology still misses the mark. So get ready for 2026. I'm getting ready for 2026 for harvest time. And we're currently mapping a strategy plan to figure out where the relief is so that we can get to parity on the scales as opposed to the high wages. So I'm looking at now trends in worksite investigations. We're going to talk about the Chevron case just briefly. Supreme Court had a case involving Chevron, and the government agency had made a determination. And whatever their decision was in Chevron did not appear to really be based on a reasonable look at the facts and how they apply to that business. And so the Supreme Court said, we're not just going to enforce a government's decision that is not reasonably based and rationally tied to how the regulations are supposed to work. So it used to be that if an agency said something, a court would not touch it. They wouldn't disturb it. That scheme is gone. And so if an agency says something now, not just that we don't like, but that we don't believe went through the regulatory process in a fair way, then we can go to court, and the court now has the power to throw that rule out. So that's a big thing. The second big issue that you really need to know about is what's going on in New Orleans right now and what is kind of dwindling down a little bit in Memphis. I spent a lot of time in Memphis as well, and it's the presence of ICE. I'm going to take the last 5 minutes to give you a workshop on dealing with immigration specifically. Here are the big issues that you need to know. And then I'll give you the background, and then I'm headed back to New Orleans to get back to Houston for the trial. You've got to take a look at your I-9 forms at your business. If you have not audited those, you should try to look through every form and decide whether you completed it correctly or not. What in the world is an I-9 form? Every employee who works in the United States is supposed to fill out a piece of paper that explains who you are and what kind of work authorization you have. And every farm in the country is supposed to keep a form. Every farm must have a form. Okay. You have to keep the forms on file for the entirety of the work relationship. And so if Brandon is coming, let's assume that my uncles let me come and work on their place in St. Helena Parish, Louisiana, right across the state line. If I go to work for my uncles on their cattle farm, then they've got to fill out a piece of paper for me. And it doesn't matter that I was born and raised in South Louisiana, I'm an American citizen. They've got to have it. You've got to have that also. In addition to filling out the form, you've got to take a look at the documents that the farm workers give to you to get the job. So you're going to hire somebody, fine. I need you to start in the morning, be here at 4 o'clock. We start about 5 o'clock after breakfast. Okay. That worker is going to have to bring you some form of identification and some form of work authorization, a proof of their work authorization. And you've got to look at that and size it up to determine whether it's legit. I'm trying to control the South Louisiana accent because I'm saying farm and farm at the same time. But you've got to take a look at this to make sure that it's legit. And so now what does that mean? How do you know if it's legit? So if I went to work for my uncles, and let's assume that they don't know me, but I'm just walking off the street and I'm gonna get a job on the farm, working with the cattle. I should kind of look like a man that's about 40 some years old to most everybody. I know I see it in the mirror every day now. That means if I give them a driver's license that has a birth date somewhere in 2000, I just don't look as good as I used to look in my 20s. I don't. But those are the types of things that you have to think about. What's the date of birth? And this guy has gray hairs in his mustache now. So does that really line up? Does he really look like he's in his late 20s or early 20s? So that's kind of one example of a tell when you're looking at the documents. It probably doesn't go any deeper than that. And now if it's a fake ID, listen, if I give them a driver's license and it has a girl's name on it, or if I've got blonde hair and blue eyes, that's a dead giveaway that the documents are probably not legitimate. Okay. But it really doesn't go, I don't think, it's probably only, for lack of a better terms, it's probably only skin deep. Okay. The government is wanting you to take a look and make a common sense judgment of whether this document looks like it actually relates to the person who's presenting it. That's the test. What's the risk if you don't keep your I-9 forms and if you don't fill them out timely within the first day of employment and then making the verification within 3 days of hire? And if you don't review the documents, on average, if the government is going to do an I-9 inspection and they find that you have paperwork errors, then the fines that they find could be up to about $3,000 per violation. Now that's on the very high end. I'm not trying to, make anybody panic. I acknowledge that the fines could be as low as several $100s per violation. But money counts. Money counts. And if you're bringing in about 50 workers every season, and you got paperwork errors throughout that labor pool, then even if the government says we're going to fine you, but we're going to fine you for each violation you got, that adds up. That adds up. And the last thing that we want in our business is having cash going out in thousands of dollars over the employee pool that we weren't expecting to have go out. And then if they decide that, listen, there were so many violations here, and we think you got this particular type of violation that you shouldn't have. So, for example, you never signed the I-9 form to confirm that you reviewed the documents. You don't have the documents recorded on the form. Those types of things could aggravate the government because it suggests that you didn't do anything to verify that these people are legal. And so we're going to go up to about $1,000 to up to $3,000 on the current scale to penalize you. And that certainly adds up also. So if you have not done this exercise, you should do it. It's a good idea to know whether you got a liability on the books or not. If you find problems, now is the time to clean it up so that you don't have that cash risk. So how did we get here on January 20th? Yes, ma'am. So yes, in section one, the employee, so not us, the employee is supposed to fill out section one. And ma'am, I'm really focusing on the fact that it's the employee. I'm focusing on that now because now that the fines are so high, as much as we can, we should get out of the habit of filling out the form for our people. It used to be that they come in and whoever's working in the front office or at the gate would do the whole thing and they would sign it. But we're probably going to have to get into a different way where we actually tell them this is section one. You can give it to them in Spanish or English. This is section one. You fill it out. And you do need to put your address in Mexico because it's asking for that. And then beyond that, they may or may not give the telephone number or the email address, and I'm kind of fine with that. But the reason that I am hot to trot about the address is because when you make payroll, you're supposed to have an ability to know what that address is over the border. And if we get it on the form, then we got it. Ma'am, you had a follow-up question. So I think farms are responsible for helping them get to the Social Security office. So let me answer you plain. And the plain answer is yes, ma'am. We're responsible for it. Do we have, so that's the answer because that's what we got to do. But I want to be cautious in acknowledging that it's the employee that's supposed to go down to the Social Security office and give them what they need. And of course, their Social Security cards can be issued if they're eligible. The reason that when we're dealing with employment and with HR issues, helping you all just with compliance, the reason that I'm making a turn now to really focus on put section one in their hands is this. When they fill out section one, they got to sign and say that what I'm telling you about my employment eligibility is legit. And so if I keep on getting them at the front gate or at the bunkhouse on day one, and I filled everything out for you, and this you answered my questions, and I'm writing it down for you, and all you got to do is sign it. I believe that that opens up too much risk where the government could later say, or they could later say, oh, I just signed it. I didn't really read it. And, he just told me that. And so I filled it out. Now, in section two, we got to do section two. So when you get down to section two is asking you, did you give this piece of paper to that man or to that woman? And did you take a look at whatever documents they gave you to start working on your job? And did you do that within 3 days of hire? That's in section two. Section one is first day. And that's another reason why I got to change my habits and make them do it on the first day. Because section one has to be first day. Section two is within 3 days. That's what the government's asking. And you got to fill it out, and you have to sign your name, and you have to date it. And you're doing that under penalty of perjury. And so when you sign this form, what this really means is, Mr. President, they came. This is the law. I'm supposed to review their ID and their employment eligibility. I did that. This is what they gave to me. I'm supposed to have it done within 3 days. I did that. And I understand that you're here and you may haul some people away, but because I did it, I have a good faith defense for any fine that you want to give to me. And most likely, if you also want to put me in trouble beyond a monetary penalty, I likely have a good faith defense to that also. You can only get there if you do the paperwork right. So on January 20th, the president issued an executive order. It was right after DC Mardi Gras. And what he said is, I'm going to enforce immigration law. I'm going to do it big time. It's going to be massive. It's going to be big. And so, we just came back from DC Mardi Gras. So you didn't really pay it never mind on January 20th. And I tell you, by the time Mardi Gras rolled around, real Mardi Gras in New Orleans in February, it was like, oh man, he's serious. When they came to Memphis, my partners in the Memphis office were calling and, it's okay. This is really, really serious. And when they showed up in the French Quarter last week, then I knew it was serious for sure. And so the government isn't playing, and you've seen that play out over the entire year. It is true that and on my docket, there are more clients, farm clients, other producer clients who are calling me to say, Brandon, they picked up my people, and what can you do to get them out of jail, immigration jail? It's really a prevalent thing. So it is true that we're going to lose some of the available labor pool. Also true that this process and this approach from the White House is not going to stop anytime soon. It's not going to stop anytime soon. The president said that we're not going to have sensitive locations anymore. It used to be that if you were at mass or in church or in a hospital or at school, the government wouldn't come in and do a whole lot of immigration stuff in those types of spaces. President said, no, we're going to use our common sense and go where they're at. So he didn't say farms. He didn't say farms, but we know that immigration, it seems to me, is targeting farms more often now because that's where a heavy concentration of foreign labor is employed. So you just have to be vigilant. You're probably gonna, in the next 3 years, you're gonna see tell of some form of ICE in Mississippi. I mean, they just across the state line right now, and they were just north of you two or 3 weeks ago in Tennessee. So eventually, I think that they're gonna be here in Mississippi. Listen, you have the right to remain silent. Your employees have the right not to speak to the government. I do not think it's a good idea for any farmer to talk to the government too much if they show up at the place. You do have a right to see a warrant. Well, you do have a right to see a warrant. So this land is my land. you can't come on my place unless you have a warrant. If you catch my workers in town, you got them. If you catch me in town out in the public, well, you got me too. But I don't have to just allow you to come onto my place. So you need to know that your workers may ask you for a Know Your Rights card. Those are online. Know Your Rights cards are online in English and in Spanish. Here's what you need to know about Know Your Rights. The union groups are talking to your workers and they're educating them in detail about what their rights are in dealing with immigration. And that means you need to know the information that your workers are receiving, because the more information that we can have, the better we can run our place, the more helpful we can be, the better relations we're going to have with our crews. This has been 20 plus years of my life as a lawyer. I work very, very close to ag in Louisiana and Mississippi, across the country. It's my first love. All right. It's my favorite client group. What do I know about the people that work with us? Not really for us, but with us. We have people, I've brought in people for over 20 years. So, folks that came to the country to go and work on farms when I was 27 are now about 45, and they've been coming with their families, and they go back. They work 10 months on and they take 2 months off and they come back. And then, yeah, they send money back, but they put their children in school. And you always hear, oh, they're a part of the family. I don't want to say that because you always hear that. And that's not exactly what I'm messaging. But I should message that my experience has been that our labor pools are very sincerely respected as a whole. We want them here. Most of my clients, most of you have called me and have asked me to do everything that I can to fix a problem or to deliver a result for your labor crews. Most of you want to be compliant. Most of you want to have labor that is in good working conditions in terms of their housing and the terms. Most of you have enough sense to know, like I know, well, when we get to August, we probably do have to knock off around 11:45 or 12 and just cool until about 1:15, 1:30 or so, because or maybe 3, depending on what time of year you are. If it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we may have to knock off about 20 minutes or so because it's just too hot to be in the open field. Or if we're in the open field and we're still working, then we got to drag water and we got to have the ice stations and all that. Most of us know these things. All right. What we're dealing with, though, on the political side, not with our politicians, but with the opposition in terms of the lawyers and the union groups that are talking to our labor. What we're dealing with are groups that are saying, here are all the standards. And yeah, these are the standards. You need to watch for violations. Okay. If you may need to report violations even before you talk to your employer. Man, that's what the risk is now. And so with this increased scrutiny, you're going to see it. I don't think it's going to change over the next 3 years. This is probably what it is for the long haul. Landing the plane now, listen, just a quick look at how does H2A and H2B work. I'm going to start with the money. Fees for H2A are going to range anywhere for the whole case. So here's an example. Brandon, I need you to give me a crew of 50 people, and I need them here on March 15th. Okay, depending on what you're doing and what you need, the fees for that, whether you're going to pay an agency, whether you're going to pay a lawyer, the fees are going to range somewhere between $3,500 and $7,700 to do the legal work. And it just depends. But it really could be as efficient as about $3,500. And it could be as significant of an investment of about $7,750, depending on what it is that you need. Okay. So that's the fees part. That's what the prices are to kind of get this going. You also have to pay for the housing, but you get an offset now on the back end for the wage. You also have to pay the costs of transportation. So across the border, I'll be down in Torreon, Mexico on the 16th, 17th, and 18th. So from Monterrey, from Torreon to Monterrey to the consulate, and then from the consulate into the United States. So if my crew live in Torreon, Mexico, and they got to get on the bus to get to Monterey, then we got to pay all of that cost from house to consulate to New Orleans or to up to Jackson, wherever you're going to make the bus stop. Okay. Then the cost back. If we bring you to the Greyhound in Jackson and we send you back, you're going to cross the border. And then we've got to get you back to your house in Torreon. That's not Monterey. It's about 2 hours outside of Monterey. Okay. And so the cost door to door is the transportation cost now. We had a habit of saying consulate to US back across the border. That's the cost. That ain't the deal no more. Okay. And they're enforcing that. Then the cost of the visa. When you go to the consulate, you're looking at about $190 a head. There may be like a border crossing fee, so it can go up to about 200 or so dollars per head. So on average, anybody that's going to get a visa, that visa that gets in the passport, that's going to cost around about $200. So it's the fee that you need to get the work done. It's the cost of the housing, it's the cost of the transportation, and it's the cost of the visa. And so you multiply that by, well, how many people am I bringing? Remember, the fees are not per head. It's rare that an agency charges a per head fee that would exceed 3,500 or 7,000. So for the way it really works is that's almost flat. And so if an agency says, or like our agency, if we say, well, we just charging a flat fee and it's 5,000 for what you need, yeah, we can divide that per head, but we don't do anything different if you add another body. So when we tell you it's 5,000 or 3,000, depending on whatever it is you're doing, that's the price whether you bring two, that's the price whether you bring 100. Or our biggest farmer is like 480 some people, and that's what the rate is. Okay. So I'm distinguishing between the fees that you need to pay for your agency work and the cost that you pay per head, because for the most part, the fees do kind of remain flat across. So listen, you got to have a job description. You got to go to the state and give a job order and file that with the Department of Labor. All of that's done electronically now. You can file your petition electronically in most cases now, and you're going to get a response for the most part from the Department of Labor within about 5 to 7 days. And then when we get to immigration, 7 to 10 days. And if you get all of the moving parts correct in between, this really is a good, reliable service and a reliable program. It's a good investment if you want consistent labor that's coming to you that can do what you need to do, and you can trust in it year after year after year. The last thing I'll say is, yes, the government has made a lot of changes. Some of them, many of them that I talked about, I think are good. Everybody wants wages that work. Everybody wants a compliance program that's easy to understand, that you can actually navigate and that you can have reliability. And so those are the issues that are good. It comes though with the knowledge that what the government is doing is they are trying to create a completely lawful workforce for ag. That's where they're going. They haven't gotten to just the plain old farm worker visa credential, but that's where they're going. So as you're going about your work, as you're finishing up this harvest season and looking toward planting for 2026, just pay attention to all of the benefits in this program. Yes, there's a lot of regulatory stuff. For the most part, your agencies, your lawyers, we're going to get it right. And if you do it yourself and you call us, well, we're going to be able to shepherd you through whatever it is. And I think that, yes, most of us are going to see increased enforcement in some way, but I still believe it's going to be a compliance-based enforcement and not really a penalty-based enforcement. That's what I truly believe. So listen, I really appreciate that you all allowed us to take time with you to give you the updates and to be a resource. we're certainly available. Our mission is to serve you and to serve you well. As I continue to work for the Mississippi Farm Bureau, we're going to continue to have labor updates whenever you call and for whatever you need. And if there's a particular issue that you have that you'd like us to take a look at, you can certainly reach out to the Mississippi Farm Bureau and get in contact, or you can contact us directly. We're very happy to help you and to serve. I wish you all the merriest of Christmases. I hope that you will keep your prayers with me as I travel back and forth across the country for the next 2 weeks and internationally. I'm very tired. It's been a long year, but we've done very good work that worked to your benefit. And so I just pray the Lord's strength as we finish up. So thank you so much. You all have a good rest of the year, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brandon. Just on the behalf of most of us in here, farmers and farmers, boy, it's a different time in labor and H2A, and what a blessing it is to have Brandon. Brandon, don't run off. I have something for you. Brandon apart, he can come here and he can talk to us farmers, and I'm quite sure he can be a little more aggressive in the courtroom, and that's very hard to come by. That he can. Every time I've been blessed enough to be around him, he's done that. But on behalf of the Farm Bureau, we want to present you with a little gift, a token, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep, a round of applause for bringing. I just have a quick few notes here. The young farmers and ranchers, I kind of look around the room. You know, there is a good need for young farmers. And they're having out at the main entrance at the hotel, the drawing to win the guns. I'm not going to call off all the guns or some shelled corn. I'm sure some of you farmers want some shelled corn, but go by there and support the young farmers. Also, 1:00 is the business meeting. Make sure we want to be able to see you there. And thanks for participating, and thanks for being here. You're dismissed.